Hello, and welcome to Not Safe for Racists, a podcast designed to address diversity, equity, and inclusion, candidly and without judgment. Our goal is to have open and honest conversations about current issues and how we can work together to improve our social, learning, and work environments. My name is Janella Bella, Principal Consultant at Diverse Solutions Strategy Firm, and your host. Well, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time. I have to say, Unlearn has been probably at the forefront of my journey for the last 5 years, and I always see different educators using it here and there, and it's kind of just been that thing that is consistent through my career, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to finally sit down with you and chat.
Wonderful. Why don't we start then by in the right way, in the good way, eh? Let's recognize whose land we're on.
Yes. Well, we are in different lands. I'm the Three Fires Confederacy. I am under the First Nations of the Caldwell First Nations in my region.
Wow.
And it is a beautiful land that I am on.
I'm on the land and high spiritual sacred land of the Six Nation peoples.
Wonderful.
I actually live on the Haldeman Tract Treaty. Some people refer to it as Kitchener-Waterloo, the Oktoberfest capital of the world, if you will, outside of Germany, that is. But this is high Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee lands, neutral people lands. You know, Anishinaabe people, before anyone else was here, the Anishinaabe, in the most high of scientific ways, called themselves the people, hence Anishinaabe. The Haudenosaunee families of high scientific and true integrity to this land called themselves people of the Longhouse, Haudenosaunee. And so I am on the land, literally, of these people, stolen land of these peoples. Haldeman Tract Treaty dates back to 1783, and that's a long time ago. But that Haldeman Tract Treaty was the agreement from both sides of the Grand River. I have it here on my wall here, 6 miles deep from each side of the river, beginning at Lake Erie and extending in proportion to the head of the said river, which then and their prosperity are to enjoy forever. And I got the date wrong. 1784 is the date on that treaty. And as you can see, that territory that was granted, that was dealt, that was truthfully said, okay, is yours, has ever been becoming like this, So I love to start in that first truthful way. I'm on the land of the Six Nation peoples. This is 1.7 million First people on this land that I call Canada. Of those 1.7 million First people at Unlearn and in our heart, in my family, in my home, I love to speak one truth before any reconciliation can take place. One truth. First people, beautiful people.
Thank you. First people, beautiful people. That is a wonderful sentiment. And I very much appreciate recognizing the land that we're on and the honor that we have to speak our truths and the truths of our world on this land and be able to share at the graces of the first people. So thank you very much. So as we get into things, and I know you're very unapologetic in your statements, and I do appreciate that so much. So I do look forward to our conversation today, and I'm very eager to dig deep and be honest with our audience.
Please forgive me if I speak wrong. If I trespass on any thoughts, please correct me, because you are much wiser and much more learned than myself.
It's the ability to speak candidly that is where we grow and learn. So I appreciate anything you say, correct or incorrect, as we're learning together. So today, for my listeners, I'm joined by Lakhdeep Singh Dhaliwal, VP of Equity Education at Unlearn and Program Facilitator at the Mosaic Institute. Thank you for chatting with me today, Lakhdeep. I genuinely and truly appreciate you taking the time to learn with me together today. So, the foremost and the forefront of this conversation, I really want to get deep into what is your passion and what is the root of you as an advocate. You have an incredible plethora of experiences, and your resume is awe-inspiring, to say the least. So, I would like to kind of give the audience an opportunity to hear what fuels your passion and what are some insights into what drives you each day.
Very good. Thank you, first off. Uh, let's get right to the answer of your first beautiful question, which is, it's not about me, sister. This work and this path that I'm on, and this high privilege that I get bestowed with, and these high elders that come into my life that push me along from being nothing to coming into places where I start to find out a little bit more about my own self, is a high blessing. The path that you mentioned in terms of credentials or again, people that have come into my life or positions that I've been in have all been blessings. I am the recipient of many, many blessings.
Thank you. I actually would say that it's very similar in my experience, and that what drives me is not what is beneficial for me, but more so the experiences I've had with others and how that has put me on a path towards reconciliation and growth for all. So it's very similar in the sense that we're working towards the betterment of other people and society based on what we've experienced. Actually, I would say one of my notable experiences, and this is not an advertisement for Unlearn. I'm just going to keep jumping back into it. One of my very first educational experiences, I was in a professional development workshop about 5 years ago, and the poster pack was used, which the poster pack, if you don't have it, so the listeners, this is something you need to bring into your classrooms, into your professional development, or even into your just individual world for growth. Because I remember walking into the gym that day, they had the poster pack on the wall. They had chart paper beside each one, and we went around in a rotation. It was kind of it wasn't, there was no like prelude to it. It was just, here's a marker, go look at these and tell us what you think. And I remember following the man with the brown marker around, and every single one, I was like, I'm going to go after this man with the brown marker. I didn't know him. I still to this day don't know him, and I regret not getting to know him, because every time I read what he'd written, I was like, why would you write that? Why do you think that? And so it definitely has given me that opportunity to see how other people think and want to get to know why people think the way they do, because that is how we move forward, is understanding why people think the way they do. So that definitely was something that generated my opportunities that I have now. So I appreciate that you've led me on this path.
Wow. We love to ask at Unlearn all the time, what brings you to Unlearn? What made you find us? From corporations that we work with, to school boards, to individuals, to governmental bodies, to sports teams. We always start from that question is, yo, what brings you to Unlearn? Did something happen, or did someone put you on to us, or like talk to us? And even from corporations, from like even Shell, huge, Texas, massive, Argentinian division, North American division, finding us on a simple Google, and someone like typing in unconscious bias, and someone who is seeing what's happening in their neighborhoods and spaces, and now all of a sudden, if you will, is called to this work of social justice and can't unsee it. And so they find us in that way, and other people finding us in all different ways. So let me just back up, please, though, and say that at Unlearn, we don't teach anyone anything. In fact, we adapt the Socratic method that it says only one thing, which is, I cannot teach anyone anything. I can only make them think. And that's loosely based on the Socratic method there, on the Socratic philosophy. So we ask pertinent questions, Janelle, sister. We ask really deep, really easy, really light questions, if you will. We ask prompts. We center all diversity, equity, inclusion, human rights topics using design. We really believe that design has the power to provoke thought and inspire positive change. So that's our mission and our vision therein, is to see the humanity in everyone. First off, that's what we really envision to do in our work. But our mission is to provoke thought and inspire positive change. And we do so leveraging design, literally. You refer to the poster packs. That's like a decade's worth of like experiences and backgrounds and, if you will, stories of people that have come into this design to help other people unlearn something, challenge the way they see something or unsee something. We often say it unlearn, that you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are, where you've been, what foods you ate, what music you listened to. And at Unlearn, we're about wringing out that sponge every once in a while that's been saturated with all kinds of stuff.
And that it is taking yourself away from what you've been saturated in and the perspective that you have, and giving you that opportunity to kind of shake it up and look at something from a different perspective. And when you do have that opportunity, as someone such as myself, where I have experienced numerous situations in my life where I've experienced the marginalization based on being a female, based on being a person of color. And it's just something that is so hard to explain until you're put into a situation where you are almost forced to explain it by looking at a simple image with people who do not see it the same way as you.
We talk about how do we become proximate to the pain of others. This is Unlearn. This is equity work. How do we become proximate to each other's story? Janelle, where you have been, what you know, where experiences that you have encountered, if you will. As you mentioned a moment ago, those experiences of marginalization. I could never know what it feels like to be in Janelle's body, what that life, what those feet, if you will, have been through. But I can identify with some elements of my own marginalization where we might have crossed over and had similar experiences. I think what we always come back to also is that, you know, this thing of racism, sexism, whatever ism you want to call it, it's not an event, is it? It's never one single event. It's a structure. There's some like deep thinking behind what's going on. And it's weird how it plays out individually in our lives when we think, oh, that's just me, my life. But when you step back and you see that system that rewards some, credits others, pushes others to get better, erects barriers against others, if you will, sees one group of people through one lens, peaceful protesters, and sees another group of people through another lens, damn terrorists.
And we're seeing a lot more of that now with racial unrest and with political unrest. We're starting to see a growth in the mistreatment of some versus others. And I think with the work similar to what Unlearn is doing, we're starting to have that exposure by experiencing other people's situation. And as we learn how some people are being treated versus how others are being treated with the use of social media, and social media is playing a huge role in this, that we're starting to become exposed to those narratives and that discussion that's not existing in our own lives, which is helping us create that comprehensive picture of these structures that are drastically impacting the human race and how we're treating each other.
We're becoming proximate to the pain of others, aren't we?
Slowly, and it is a profound experience to be a part of. So
reckoning to be alive in this time, it's a high privilege, isn't it? It's the biggest privilege ever, isn't it? To be alive right now with everything that's going down. Wow.
It is.
It's high time we do something with it. As Angela Davis says, right? In a racist society, it is not enough to be not racist. We got to be anti-racist, right? That's what it's, there's some dynamicism, if you will, to this.
It is. And we're growing to become, we know that there's something so grand happening right now that everyone knows that they need to be on the right side of history. And how are we growing to become a better human race for everyone? because we understand, because we have compassion, because we're developing empathy, and because we can see that it's not about acknowledging that we need to have diversity or that we need to be not racist. It's actually taking the steps into actually putting anti-racism programming into effect, and initiatives and awareness, and taking that next step into how we're actually doing it instead of just acknowledging it.
I feel you. There's a sense of a shift, if you will, a dynamic shift from sympathy to empathy taking place in corporate spaces, even in the media, believe it or not, in private institutions, even on my street. There seems to be a shift from sympathy to empathy. In sympathy, we don't have many connections to others. In sympathy, we can walk by and say, "Hey, what's up?" and just walk by someone, right? In empathy, we stop and we're like, "Yo, Janelle, how you doing? You okay? How was your day today? What's good?" We go a little bit deeper, don't we? In empathy, we start to develop all kinds of neural connections that in sympathy just weren't there. It is in these deeper connections to each other inside that empathy piece. What does it feel like to be in those shoes that Janelle's in? What does it feel like to have those experiences? Where can I identify with them, and where can I just not even picture what she has been through, what she knows? This is empathy, and inside empathy, crazy neuron connections take place. Synaptic nerves fire at massive amounts, and all the blood goes rushing to one really amazing part of our brain, and that's the hippocampus. And believe it or not, sister, all learning and memory resides in the hippocampus. So literally when we say, "I feel you, dog," our young people say in our workshops, often across Canada, in our high school and our American workshops that we do, "I feel you, dog." We are literally identifying with that truth, that I feel what it feels like to walk in your shoes, to be where you're from. And that, now look at the deeper connections that take place neurologically to each other. And we all know about neuroplasticity. We constantly grow. And so literally bigging each other up, identifying with each other, becoming more empathetic to each other is a way of becoming healthier, becoming resilient to some of the craziness going on in the world, if you will, finding the center. So if you can operate from that place, if you will, of empathy, as you know, sister, you emanated. Even when I jumped on the mic here and I saw your beautiful face, and just there's something about you, even your voice, it emanates from that place of empathy. So I'm very happy to be here with you. Happy Friday to you, sister.
Yes, happy Friday to you too. And I truly appreciate that you've broken down into the truth and the foundation of us working with each other and caring for each other. Stepping back into that idea of developing that empathy, and within learning to have that empathy, I focused on research quite a while back that was developed on a theory about considering why students should care about what they're learning. And I started developing this model for teachers to create interest-based learning focused on care and compassion and ideas that matter to students. Because when they're not focused on something that matters to them, if they can't pinpoint why something matters to them, then they're not going to be able to really draw in the benefit of that lesson. And even so, I'm teaching civics and careers right now, which profoundly relevant course for today's society, and it seems to be something that's often brushed over. So I am so grateful for the students that I have right now. They are so invested in themselves and as well as our community, and I've never had a group that is so genuinely interested in the common good and developing a better situation for the future. And one of my students always says to me, "But Miss, you're not teaching me how to be my own boss. Miss, you're not teaching me the things that we need to do in real life. And these are just the foundational things." And so they really give me kind of a check. I have to check myself. And I'm like, "Oh, you're right. Okay, so how can we relate this to what you're going to do in the future with it? How is this important?" Because they're writing resumes and cover letters right now, and they have no interest in it. They say, "Miss, I have my own marketing company on social media. I'm flipping stuff online. Why do I need to know how to do this? I want to learn how to make a budget. I want to learn how to invest, and I want to do these things. And so it brings me right back to that root of needing to connect them to their learning and develop that relationship with the core and foundational skills, and why that is involved in our society, to get back to that root of learning. And I think that's what we're distancing ourselves from. And maybe this transition in politics and our racial unrest in our society is taking us back to that root.
Wow. Two things. We need to center, sister, on that. Thank you for sharing. Beautiful. You remind me of other truths, two truths herein. One truth is that we need to center belonging. We need to center the fact that belonging is tied to mattering, right? Dr. Gordon Flett's done some wicked research on this around the world, and he's connected to this idea that, look, where you see belonging go up in places, health goes up, health outcomes go up, all kinds of stuff goes up. Your grades go up in places where you feel that you belong. And how do we get there then? At Unlearn, people ask us, so what, now what? And we often come back and we say, look, for this, again, in that feathery touch of Unlearn, there is no one right way. However, the research shows, and 10 years ago, they used to call us tree huggers for this talk, but now the research has caught up. Social determinants of health has shown literally how you operate, how you go about your day truly affects how long you live, the quality of your life, the quantity, literally, of your life there is. So belonging is tied to mattering. Those places and spaces, sister, where we matter, where if Janelle shows up at 4 and she's like, where is that Lakhdeep guy? He was supposed to be here. Now Lakhdeep thinks that maybe Janelle doesn't care and she'll go on with another guest, or maybe there'll be another link, or maybe Janelle has many other things to do, but Janelle picks up the phone, or she hits a WhatsApp message to Lakhdeep and is like, yo, get your over here, right? Now, what happens is Lakhdeep gets reminded in that moment to be like, oh my gosh, Janelle, my bad, peace, I forgot, right? But also in that moment, there's some part of Lakhdeep, which I like to, I'm reading more about, it's connected to that hippocampus, that learning and memory. And what happens is I get reminded that I matter. I matter to Janelle. Janelle matters to me. And now where we have places and spaces where we matter, we have places and spaces where we belong. So the game, the hard part of this game is to increase belonging. And how do we do that? By increasing peeps mattering. Give our young people in school tell us often at Unlearn, I just don't matter. If I were to not show up tomorrow to class, no one would ask about me. If I weren't to make it to this event, no one would really, and I'd be like, wow, that is such an indicator of mattering. What's the mattering scale in your classroom, in your places and spaces? And one more thing, sister, before I stop speaking, sorry for being long-winded. That was the first truth, is increasing mattering, increasing, and how it's tied to belonging. The second truth, sister, is CRRP, culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy. And that's a fancy title for just saying we got to reflect our kids. We got to use their language. In fact, when we turn around in that book in the corner, it shouldn't be now just Tom, Dick, and Harry. It's got to be Janelle and Lakhdeep in that book now. And what is curriculum? First curriculum is relationships. And every curriculum that comes from that now is growth from relationships. Right? So we need to center these things. We need to center everyone's background. We need to reflect them. We need to meet them where they're at. And we need to model this more. So that's what Unlearn is hoping to do in some education spaces. In the corporate spaces, we do something similar, but we do a lot of more team building, challenging norms, challenging diversity, equity policies, helping, supporting people to see the humanity in everyone. This is a life skill.
And with those two truths, and I was so eager to jump in, but I wanted to hear the depth of your explanations, because they're so pure and genuine and informative, and they make me think so much deeper into my own practice. And so talking about mattering, and you're so right, especially now with online education and students logging in and we don't see them and we don't interact with them and no one's interacting with them and they're behind a screen. If they don't log in, there's so many opportunities for these students to just disappear. Or even when they log in and then they disappear because you're not engaging with them or not discussing with them. I know that I typically start my day with just sometimes I get caught up with my students talking for 10, 15, 20 minutes about nothing that really is relevant to what we're learning, but it's just so pure and genuine and joyful to have a conversation with them, because I feel like some of them at some point just don't have anyone to have those conversations with. And so mattering, yes, 110%. And I think if more students were drawn in to their environment, then they would care. Brings me right back to Freedom Writers, that movie from 2006.
Nice.
I show it to my students because I said, this, I can't teach, I'm not teaching you in this way. This is not a movie about me. This is a movie about showing you that you are these students. You matter. You are supposed to be here, and we are supposed to be a community. We are a little family. And that does kind of transfer over into workplaces, but like you said, it's not really the same. Workplaces focus on more of their training rather than representation.
Mm.
But it draws me right back to some of the unlearned graphics that I've seen, where it draws upon representation of different cultures, different names, different people, different colors. And that simple representation within curriculum, within content, within novel use, or even examples. If you're using an article written by John Smith versus an article written by Ahmed, and it's just, it provides that safe space, that welcome space where students can see that they are important, that they are capable, and that they can rise to that position of being valued in that classroom or in that workplace setting.
These posters, Janelle, they become, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love that our organization is in some spaces like Maple Leaf Foods. I love that we're in some places and spaces like Shell, like Cernak, the Crown Relations in Indigenous Northern Affairs Canada. I love that we're in some of these places like Peel School Board, Wellington Catholic School Board, and many Niagara Catholic. We're blessed in these spaces. Sister, I love that our posters are up. In some spaces, like when we're not in the COVID ward, come into the school and see them up. Like that, some schools plaque them, they big them up, and it's great. They become diagnostics of equity health, right? That this conversation, this stuff is valued here. It becomes almost like a right in your face. We wear our heart at this school, and here's the things that we espouse. Here's what we're about, if you will. I like that, but we often challenge people, organizations, school boards, corporations. It ain't just a picture on the wall, right? It is now a tool that you can use to go deeper in understanding of each other, to unpack what do you see, what do you know, what do you feel. There's all kinds of research that goes into keeping these designs open for interpretation. So yes, we're trying to push the topic of an equity, social justice, maybe diversity, representation issue, but it's grounded in that it's open, it remain open to interpretation. There's multiple interpretations of an unlearned design, as you know, sister, but we use these designs to do stuff, to push the dialogue and then push it into actionable items. We always center story. And what best way to center story than to do again with design? Design has that power of centering people's story, what they see, what they think, where they know, again, that hippocampus, all my learning and memory is often stimulated in unlearned design. This reminds me of grade 3 when I went to this school. And then all that starts flooding back into design.
And I think that not putting a intention on these images is what makes them so valuable, because when you put an intention on what you're supposed to see or what you're supposed to recognize from it, it discounts and it discredits those who may not be experiencing those situations, or those who may not be aware of those situations. And we can't discredit those people. We can't discredit someone who doesn't understand the experiences of a marginalized person, or someone who hasn't experienced racism, or who hasn't, who has maybe lived a life of privilege. Because if we discredit those people, it puts a blame on them, and they almost feel that shame and that guilt. They're like, this is not me. And for a very long time, my husband and I've had a lot of conversations about white privilege. He's white. And it was with conversations with him that I drew a deeper understanding of what these statements of privilege truly meant in the circumstances that they were being presented at some points. And I think by grasping at the different, different perspectives, we're able to see that we can't just celebrate and recognize the voices of those who are marginalized. We have to recognize and understand the voices of those who do not recognize and understand marginalization. And
Sure, this
that is
work, as you know, sorry to interrupt you, as you know, sister, this work is so much more than above us, right? It's so much more than what presents often before the eye, if you will. It's not about guilt or shame, this work. It ain't even about that anymore. It might have been back a little bit ago. It ain't. This work is about responsibility. It's about truth. It's about centering that stuff. And then inside centering that, not only becoming more aware of each other, now becoming more respectful of each other, right? We talk about like, what's this ever going to do? What's this training? What's this ever thing going to accomplish? It's going to accomplish one thing and one thing only. We are going to become aware of each other. That's the start of all kinds of empathy models, awareness of each other.
It is awareness and the appreciation. And so much of this is working towards that. And I think as we grow, and I'm sure you will recognize this, I think we will see that we need to move away from just hearing the stories and the voices of those who have been oppressed. We need to start hearing all voices. And for myself, I've experienced many situations where I've become that token marginalized person, where I have to speak on behalf of other people, where there's a situation regarding the use of the N-word, and they'll go, "Oh, Janelle, what should we do?" And I'm like, I don't speak for every Black person. I don't speak for every marginalized person. Or if there's so many realms and categorizations of diversity that it's become confusing, and we're just like, oh, you have experienced it, so let's ask you.
Tick, tick,
Yeah,
tick,
yeah.
right?
Checking boxes. And
That's
that's and even companies and schools now are starting to integrate the chief of diversity officers, which is a step forward. But in the sense, I am noticing a lot of just checking boxes, and that's where we kind of become stagnant again.
mm-hmm. And therein lies some of that guilt and shame coming back in us, even in our systems, in our roles. I often hear people tell us this truth that you're sharing here, sister, and I love to listen more, because inside these stories you start to unpack where there are places where we hold power and privilege, and where there are places where we do not. We often see that a narrative, one single narrative, starts to form when we start to look at the structure of that power. It's often white, it's often male, it's often heterosexual, right? It's heteronormative values. It's often Judeo-Christian based, right? There are all kinds of, if you will, if we just look down at it and have a look, we can see similarities that are pushing one narrative and one narrative only. Yeah. And again, I find that in our work, it's about deconstructing those one at a time, one at a time. And you can help people come through that dialogue and that discussion, and that point of coming past the fragility, coming past the point of defensiveness. We talk about it, unlearn the amygdala is being hijacked, and how do you diffuse it? How do you, and we give techniques for how to diffuse amygdala hijack. Amygdala is that part of our brain that says, "What'd you say to me?" You know that Drake track, 0 to 100? That's your amygdala. That's straight up. You can, when you know those places and spaces when people say that certain thing to us in that certain way, or maybe we log into a forum and someone has written that certain word in that certain way to us, and we go from 0 to 100, that's your amygdala. And that old response of ours, the fight, the flight, the freeze, that's all coming to this place again. And at Unlearn, we like to help people, first off, understand what's happening in the amygdala. And no, we ain't no scientists, and no, we ain't trying to be PhDs in terms of neurobiology. What we're trying to do is help people come closer, proximate to the pain of others. This is true equity work, from awareness to action.
It is. And as we move towards action, which hopefully is our next general social state, I would hope, as we grow together and become more active and global citizens. I did want to question, maybe in relation to this, you used two terms that I really want to hear your explanation on, because I haven't heard them in a lot of circumstances. And you use frontline leadership and servant leadership, which in this actionable state, we are going to become leaders. And I would love if you could explain these terms to me and how they take place in this process.
Sister, frontline leadership. I love that word. Frontline leadership is literally what it spells out, what it sounds out, what it visualizes out. There's a front line. There's a line. There's a line where some of this is happening 24/7. It's legit the front street. Yeah. And that frontline leadership is those that are legit on street level, doing street things 24/7. Some of my young people often talk about it as, Mr. Dhaliwal, this is the hustle. And I say, yes, this is the hustle. Those people that put their grind in for their passion, for their goals in life, for what they want, that don't give up no matter what the world is telling them, what others are telling them, what systems are telling them. This is frontline, if you will, leadership. You find frontline leadership in all kinds of places. Some of them are cops. You find frontline leadership in, some of them are nurses. You find frontline leadership in a retired RAF pilot down the street from me. You find frontline leadership in people like my one neighbor who just likes to walk everyone's dogs on the coldest days when she knows that dogs are not getting out, and she wants to service them and help them. To serve others, to lose yourself almost, and not almost, it's radical language, so I have to speak truth to it. To lose yourself in others, in the pursuit of others. This is servant, frontline leadership. That servant leadership separates more so from professional or frontline leadership when we just have servants that have dedicated themselves to others. That's what makes you a servant. When you lose yourself, when there's no more Lakhdeep and having to have these degrees on my back wall to remind you. That's my own personal ego. When I come down here, often I fall in love with Lakhdeep, if you will, on some level. The brain starts falling in love. Look what you've done, Lakhdeep. And that ego, that heteronormative, that masculine-centered place, I'm always working on deconstructing. And I'll get there one day. I'll get there one day where I won't need some of this stuff. But this stuff helps me to ground myself in my relationships. All those people that have joined me on my journey in this work, this is servant leadership. When I lose myself in them. So you might see that some of them or some of the stuff going on behind me, or I often might talk about it and Unlearn that the places and spaces that I've been, it's never about us at Unlearn. It's always about the relationships. This is first curriculum. And I feel that this is servant leadership, you know?
And I see servant leadership and I see frontline leadership every day, and I've never really had a term for it. And I now can see how that is and how we need to grow with that. And I can only imagine living on your street. I would be the person that walks everyone's dog in the winter.
Nice.
and that's something that we need to work back towards, instead of just the mandatory community service hours in school, and then it kind of just dies off. There's no real connection. And we spoke about that at the beginning. There's no real connection between cultures and people. And we're very segmented in our lives, whether it's your work or your school or your home. We don't really have that genuine sense of community and society in a lot of situations, which is where servant leadership and frontline leadership comes from. And it is bred there, and it grows there when people genuinely care about each other because they are other human beings, not because they are working with them or they exist with them. And I did want to point out, I also am sitting in front of a wall and of those experiences. And I've struggled a lot lately with the idea of needing education to prove myself. I feel like where I am situated and the work I do after completing the education that I have, it has allowed me to grow based on not the degrees that sit behind me, but the people and the conversations I've had within those experiences. And what's tangled in my brain is that I can't go out to a consultation or an interview and say, I talked to this person about this and I experienced this and I was here and I grew with this group. They want to see these pieces of paper, and we still live in a society where genuinely these pieces of paper hold power. And it's moving from that slowly, but there's no real acknowledgement in society of experience right now. And I think that goes along with these deconstruction of institutions and deconstruction of ideas, and that we're working towards with the political and racial unrest as well. So it's all, I think,
Mm-hmm.
tied together.
I think it's pretty interesting. You got people like Elon Musk saying, you don't got to have a degree to work for Tesla, to work for me. You got people like Google here in town, in Kitchener, downtown, in my town here, close to me, that are hiring people legit right out of high school. And some people that dropped out of high school, Google hired because they have a certain skill set, because they have a certain passion, because they have a certain. I agree with you. There are so many places that I should recognize, but I can't. I can't. Those teachers that I've experienced in my life, those degrees on degrees on degrees that I could show you that are invisible. And again, connected to you, sister, they're all the relationships. They're the elders. There are people that were wise enough to teach something and download something to me or inspire, challenge, if you will, me in other regards. There are so many of those. But you know what, sister? We often, again, in education, it's so weird. That's the tainting force. You fall in love with who you think you are. You fall in love with some of these pursuits, which is great to do. And then the system tends to reward you, if you will. The system rewards you for becoming separate from what was your original purpose. Your original purpose was to come in and improve yourself and help others. And often is the case that we come out of school and we're not prepared to help ourselves or others. We're not given, if you will, the tools that our young people want, that our people in post-secondary education expect. Yeah, it's weird. There's a weird system at play, isn't there?
It is, and I'm sitting here, and I'm actually getting emotional thinking about this spiritual journey that I am on. And as you speak and as we talk about it, I start to think, is what is fueling my ability to do what I want to do and to be who I can be for others? And you start to realize, and as I'm realizing, is that is the journey that I'm on academically, as I have progressed through my academic endeavors, is it for myself? Is it for my purpose? Or is it for others to recognize the value of my purpose? And I don't think that we need to obviously recognize people based on the credentials behind them. And that's the growth that we're working towards. And I'm hoping that with that growth, I'm able to apply more and empower more people to genuinely use who they are and how they engage with each other and share their stories to challenge the status quo, and that we don't need those pieces of paper to prove that we need to change.
my ninth guru says, "So Pandit, jo man par bodhe," which means that person is the wise, the learned, who instructs their own mind. And what's the best instruction to the mind? One of the best instructions is, you don't know nothing, mind. You don't know nothing. Yeah. And that part of that pursuit of checking the ego, as you said a few moments ago, lies therein, of admitting that often is the case, the world wants you to know everything all the time. Often is the case, you think just because you got a cell phone in your pocket, you've got the world's knowledge through Google at your access. A kind exercise in yourself to help quiet the mind often is based in, you don't know nothing. Right? And some of that is based on elder knowledge as well, not just from gurus, not just from elders in First People communities, not just from all kinds of priests and people that are learned in theology as well. There is a pursuit to this, and the pursuit is to lose yourself in service to others. And therein lies the ego crushing stuff that goes on, and also lies the decolonization stuff that we so need in this road.
Mm-hmm.
We need to deconstruct some of that power by losing our own ego.
Yeah, very much so, especially as we work towards growing within a capitalistic society, and a society that bases itself so much on being our best selves and growing ourselves. And then when we humble ourselves and realizing that we don't know anything, that's when we grow.
Everything is borrowed, sister. The world makes you think like it's yours forever. It's not. Your body isn't yours. Your next breath isn't yours. Everything's rented here. So while you're paying rent and doing your thing here, make space for others.
We may as well do good while we're doing it.
Make space for others.
Well, Lakhdeep, I truly and genuinely appreciate the conversation we had today. It was moving for myself and educational for myself as I learned and grew within it. Before we sign off, I would love if you have any final sentiments or comments for the audience, just to kind of leave with us today.
You know, at a time that we live in and all kinds of craziness going down, first off, sister, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for inviting me into knowing a little bit about you, knowing a little bit more about the lives that you touch. This is such an honor to come a little bit closer to you. And again, those lives that you touch. You're a brilliant educator. You're a brilliant podcast host as well. And I hope to learn more about your brilliance as we go forward. So thank you so much for this opportunity to meet and speak with you and your audience. I think if I had a chance to wrap up nicely, I would take a moment to say, first people, beautiful people. And I'll say one more time, first people, beautiful people. And we can change systems, entire systems that were against that and against all kinds of other truths. We can change it, family. We can change. And how can we change? We can change ourselves. It starts with ourselves. We have to lose ourselves in service to others. This is equity work. This is what the world requires now. And this is also part of social determinants of health. I cannot be healthy if you, my sister, are not healthy. This is unjust. So 2021 is all about justice. Let's go get some. Let's go get some for our brothers and sisters.
Thank you. And yes, let's go get some, because if we don't, nothing's going to change. Well, thank you again. And it was wonderful to have you joining me on my podcast, Not Safe for Racists. More information about Unlearn, the Mosaic Institute, and Lakhdeep Singh Dhaliwal can be found in the links provided within this podcast, as well as additional information and resources for the topics we discussed today. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Janella Bella, and remember, there's a difference between being racist and sounding racist, but there's no excuse for either.